We are Today is June 23rd, 2025. Parshat Korach. Uh, this will be our last class for this season. So we if we were together, we would have a party and a feast and a siyum and uh, we tell stories and play games and uh, eat cake. But we're all in our separate screens, so we'll have to pledge that one day we will be able to be together again soon. Although it is convenient to be here on our screens, and we all enjoy that on some level as well. But we what we gain from screens, we lack from the personal interaction, and in our environments, we certainly like to have the personal interaction. So let us look forward to possibilities of personal interactions again, and that's a good segue to this parsha, which is, in a sense, about personal interactions and the breakdown of personal interactions. I want to have as a theme for this class specifically anger, but I do want to put on the table the question of Moses as an angry person. Is Moses an angry person or not? And before we jump to any conclusions on that, we have to explore some of the texts. Um, and I'm going to go right into it and just pull up the first text on this, which is from our Parsha, and just to give us a an orientation to this theme. So here we go. We're going to just bring up this the text at the beginning of the Parsha from chapter 16 of the book of Numbers. So, Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi v'Datan v'Aviram b'nei Eliyav ben Pelet b'nei Ruvain. So, there betook himself Korach, son of Yitzhar, son of Kahat, son of Levi, Datan, Aviram, the sons of Eliyav, and on the cast. Here's our introduction of the cast of rebels. They took, whatever that means, and we've talked about that in the past. They rose up before Moshe with men of stature from the children of Israel, 50 and 200, leaders of the community, those called in the appointed council men of name. We just should pause here for a second and say, you know, this is not a couple of, rabble rousers running on alternate slate for the, leadership of the community. This is a significant gathering, a movement. 250 people with leaders is a kind of, it's almost an insurrection. You could even call it an insurrection. What we would say, it's a crack in the leadership elite of the people. They assembled against Moshe and Aaron and said to them, too much is yours, for the entire community, the entirety of them are holy, and in the midst is God. Why then do you exalt yourselves over the assembly of God? Moses heard, he flung himself on his face. Then he spoke to Korach and to his entire community and said, at daybreak, God will make known who is his and who is holy, and he will declare him near to him. The one that he chooses, he will declare near to him. This do, take yourselves fire pans, Korach and his entire community, place fire in them, and put incense on them before the presence of God tomorrow. And it shall be, the man whom God chooses, he is the Holy One. Too much is yours, sons of Levi. And Moshe said to Korach, now hearken, sons of Levi, is it too little for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the community of Israel to bring you near to him, to serve the serving tasks of the dwelling of God, to stand before the community, to attend on them? He has brought near you on all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. Would you seek the priesthood as well? Truly, it is you and your entire community who come together against God. For as for Aaron, what is wrong with him that you should grumble against him? Moses sent to call Datan and Aviram, the sons of Eliyav, but they said, we will not go up. Is it too little that you have brought us up from the land flowing with milk and honey to cause our death in the wilderness, that you should play the prince over us, even the prince? Then too, not to a land flowing with milk and honey have you brought us, nor have you given us inheritance of field and vineyard. The eyes of these men would you gouge out? We will not go up. Vayichar leMoshe ma'od. Then Moses became exceedingly upset, and this is our really key phrase here. This is what I'm going to turn on. Sorry about the second phrase. Moses became exceedingly upset, and he said to God, "Do not turn your face toward the grain gift of theirs. Now one donkey of theirs have I carried off. I have not done ill to one of them." Moses said to Korah, "You and your entire community be there before the presence of God, you and they and Aaron tomorrow, and take each man his pan, place on them the smoking incense, bring it near before the presence of God, each man his pan, 50 and 200 pans. Also, you and Aaron, each man his pan." So they took each man his pan, placed on them fire, put on them smoking incense, and stood at the entrance to the tent of appointment, as did Moshe and Aaron. And Korach and his community assembled against them at the entrance to the tent of appointment. Now the glory of God was seen by the entire community, and God said to Moses and to Aaron, saying, "Separate yourselves from the midst of the community, that I may finish them off in an instant." They flung themselves on their faces and said, "O God, God of all, the spirits of all flesh, when one man sins at the entire community, will you be furious?" God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the community, saying, go up from around the dwelling place of Korach, Datan, and Aviram." Moses arose and went to Datan and Aviram, and there went after him all the elders of Israel. And Moses and he spoke to the community and saying, "Pray, turn away from the tents of these wicked men. Do not touch anything that is theirs, lest you be swept away in all their sins." They went up from the dwellings of Korach, Datan, and Aviram all around. Now Datan and Aviram had come out, stationed at the entrance of their tents with their wives, their children, and their little ones. Moshe said, "By this you shall know that God sent me to do all these deeds, that it was not from my own heart. If, like the death of all humans, these men die, and the calling to all account of all humans is accounted upon them, it is not God who sent me. But if God creates a new creation and the ground opens its mouth and swallows up them and all that is theirs, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you will know that these men have scorned God." Now it was, just as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground that was beneath them split, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up and their households, all the human beings who belonged to Korach and all the property. So they went down, they and all theirs, alive to Sheol. The earth covered them, and they vanished from the midst of the assembly. And now all Israel that were around them fled at the sound of their voice, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up." And a fire went out from before the Lord God and consumed the 50 and 200 men, those bringing the incense. Okay, we could leave it there. Uh, that's the story, quickly recited in a nutshell. It's a difficult story. I mean, there are lots and lots of difficult elements of the story in the way that we like to study them. Focused in the past on Sheol. What does it mean that the earth split up, and all of that. Um, and we could uh, ask the political questions, which are important questions about leadership, about Moses as leader, and factionalism. This is not a democracy right now here. God has appointed Moses. There was no election of Moses. Moses has to, in a sense, have the confidence of the people, but nowhere in the Torah do we see that they get a vote. So that structure of you know political life is not in the Torah. It's not anywhere in the Torah, notwithstanding the idea that there are some currents towards that. But Moses's legitimacy is based on God's appointment of Moses. And Moses' legitimacy is based on the people's acceptance of God's appointment of Moses as leader, essentially up until this point. Um, you have had uh, periods of, rebuttal and complaint against Moses, and we will see them some of them, uh, prior to this, where it is all leading up to a challenge of authority. I just want to dial back to, the Parsha that we had last week, which is the spies, what we call the spies, the scouts. The Parsha of the scouts essentially will lead up to a, there's no parliamentary procedure in the Torah for a vote of non-confidence, but in our parliamentary democracies, the ones that a couple of us come from, when you're not when you have no confidence in the government, what happens is the opposition will make a motion and say we no longer, the government no longer has the confidence of this house, and so if they have enough votes they can vote out the government. That is to say, a majority of votes to say there's no confidence in this government, at which point the sovereign dissolves the parliament, and the the country goes to elections. That's what happens in Canada and Britain, in Israel also, in parliamentary democracies, where a majority rules in the parliament, and there's a mechanism to express confidence in the government through the elected representatives. Canada, I think, at this point is quite a benign case, but Israel, it's a not a benign case, since the majority is very slim, and there's always a question as whether or not the government is going to hold its power. And a couple of weeks ago, before the attacks took place on Iran, the government actually nearly fell on a question of the recruitment of the Haredim. And I think what will emerge in the analysis of this period in years from now is that there may have been some inkling that something big was going to happen. So just don't do this now. Don't upset the government. We have to get through this, and that's why I think there was some last minute real horse trading, and Netanyahu was able to hold on to the government. The point is that in the Bible, there's no mechanism for expressing non-confidence. And here, Korah and his cohort expresses the non-confidence, and that results in their annihilation. I mean, this is not a benign parliamentary democracy here. This has real ramifications. They are essentially in a face-off with Moses with their fire pans, the most potent element within the sacrificial structure. We know that because in the book of Leviticus, when Nadav and Avihu put incense in their fire pans, it's the wrong incense. It results in their incineration. So that's very dangerous. It's the unconventional, power of the sanctuary system is the incense. It's really, I don't want to be too current, but it's fissile material, this incense. It's very volatile radioactive material, which, if not properly handled, can destroy you, which is what happens. They get incinerated. The others get swallowed, or the whole cohort gets swallowed up by the earth as a way of going down. And that's the story. The story is a story of insurrection, rebellion, non-confidence, God, God responding and quiet, silencing them literally forever. Marlene Herman, you have a question. Go ahead.
Well, two aspects. One, where were they when Nadav and Avihu did the same thing that Moses was saying? They didn't learn from somebody else's mistake. But on the other hand, why was there several thousand people, 100 people who were going to come along with Korah?
So on the
Where did
question
he
of
get his power?
yeah, I would caution myself reading the Nadav and Avihu story as a story of rebellion. I don't see it that way, as a rebellious story. I see it as a kind of reckless story. One second, and then a story of and not even reckless. It's getting carried away.
So they brought the fire on themselves, and these guys with Korach, they're being told to do that very thing.
Correct, correct. They're in the enthusiasm and zeal and the ecstasy, if you will, of the moment of celebration of the consecration, inauguration of the sanctuary. They 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 go a little too far. They step beyond the bounds of the requisite behavior, and for that they pay with their lives. Here, it's almost. I mean, I don't want to say it's comical, but the Bible, the Torah is, you know, being told to us that in a way that we know what the code is here. We know what the underlying symbolism, or we know what the underlying significance of all these elements is. And whenever you mention incense, I mean, I don't want to be too current, but I want to say it's like talking about uranium. Put some uranium in your pen and see if you have the right kind of, containment. Okay? Exactly. And so you just don't want to handle that with your bare hands. And that's what they're being told here, because if this prerogative is going to be given to you, then you need to be acceptable to handle the most quote unquote fissile material, the most radioactive material, volatile material in the temple system. And clearly they're not. And that's why they themselves perish from it. Okay. Nanette, go ahead. You have to mute.
Okay. So is this the first time people are voicing rebellion? Because if the golden calf, no one really, they just made the golden calf. And with Noah, you know, I mean, he didn't rebel. He just went along with it.
So it's a
Uh,
very, very good point. And we're going to put the word rebellion into a broad category here of, grumblings, complaints, kvetching, and all the things that the caricature of the people that emerges both in the Bible itself and certainly later on, certainly in rabbinic literature, and well through right down to this day. If I watch an Israeli satire show. They haven't put out a new season. I think they're done, but it was called HaYehudim Ba'im, and they have beautiful send-ups of Moses and the people, and it's hysterical in the way that they depict the people as always, always complaining. They're kvetches all the time. And to a certain extent, within the popular imagination, Jewish people are identified within, as I said, in the satirical, not so much satirical as always being a bit difficult. I would just say, if you want to experience this, um, just just go to any line at the airport, and you'll, in Ben Gurion, or, where we have a certain characteristic when it comes to behavior. Go ahead, John.
I- excuse me. I think there's something problematic here. I ask, where was the due process that Korah was accorded? What statute did he violate? And is the message here, you better keep your mouth shut, don't criticize, because if you rock the boat a little, you're going to get punished.
Well, there is some kind of due process in terms of conversation, and I think this really goes to the point as to, how we portray this event, and how we portray God and Moses in the Bible. Uh, God, I want to forgive me, God. God never comes off too well in the Bible. God is always destroying things and getting exceedingly angry. God is so powerful, and very zealous about things, notwithstanding that when God reveals his attributes to Moses, he talks about being compassionate. And so there is the sense that while there is no specific due process, what Moses deciphers from Korah's complaint is not a due process complaint, it's an ad hominem complaint. And that's the difference. You can you can you can level a charge against an issue, and it's different when you level a charge against an individual. And this is not a charge on an issue, it's a charge against an individual. Bob, go ahead.
Wanted to come back to where you started, which was Moses angry? And I'd like to suggest that perhaps he was frustrated and angry, and so was everybody else there. And probably this is a cautionary tale about the impact of jealousy, of lust, of pride, much like Pirkei Avot talks about that stuff.
Well, I agree with you. I think, and I'm going to ask, Stanley has his hand up here too, but is a resident psychiatrist, psychologist, person who you know, I want to say that it's like you pull up one emotion and you have every other emotion connected to it, and together with everything that you mentioned, Bob, are other things, and we will look at it's like, can you splice out all the different kinds of things, the emotions that are operating in this moment? I think it is possible to splice out anger and all of the other things that you mentioned, and there are some more. But Stanley, go ahead.
Um, Maybe this isn't along exactly
Yeah,
the
no,
same
go ahead. No, it's
lines,
different.
but
You're looking.
yeah, but so I've been wondering whether what Korach was doing was basically a power grab. He wanted to be the leader, so this was self-aggrandizing, in which case you can understand the punishment. Or was there some legitimacy to it? That is, that Moses wasn't the best leader, or he wasn't attending to people's needs, or it was time for a change, or something. That is, how do we determine, what was okay here and what wasn't, what was legitimate and what wasn't.
I think it's such a great question because, you know, organizations, peoples, communities, governments, they go through different cycles, and there will be a cycle of acceptance and together, and then a kind of fracture or moving through a crisis. We've thought a lot about similar themes. When thinking about, for example, before the war started, we were talking about, it was called fourth quarter Israel, that Israel is moving into its fourth, generation, and that in the fourth generation, once you after the founders, after the developers, after the mover to scale, you have crises of identity and all sorts of issues. This happened in America. The Civil War essentially was a question of what it means. Leaders that are around, in a sense, have to kind of regenerate themselves, and I think in America, at least, they found a solution to this, which was, the term limit, that no president could serve more than two consecutive terms, and I mean, the reason for that was because of a profound sense that by FDR's fourth term, things were going, it was just, um, becoming to assume there were too many assumptions there, and people did want a change, um, and the extent to which that these issues are at play in the community, I think is a very valid question. There's frustration there. Uh,
Yeah.
Moses is a certain kind of leader, and at a certain point, then another. I mean, as with all, political situations, you can get very used to that kind of leader, and then there generates a kind of opposition to that, and the skill has to be in understanding the opposition, bringing it into for and working with that. But that things reached a crisis here at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to shift to the question of his reaction, because Moses, um, and here I'm going to highlight the text that is the his reaction to specifically to Datan and Aviram. Datan and Aviram become they are so caustic in their response to Moses. They say the really very damaging things. They say, you know, you took us out of the land of milk and honey. You're not going to bring us into the land of milk and honey. Egypt was the land of milk and honey. Are you going to lord over us? Are you going to gouge out our eyes? And the term gouge out our eyes is the term for a slave. That is to say, the slave that can't be redeemed gets blinded by the owner, and like Samson, will become the kind of beast of burden, in the mill house, pushing the mill wheel. And that's what they mean when they say that. And so Moses, there are lots of things that Korah has said and the others have said, but when it comes to this moment, Moses, this is his response. I'm tempted to say Moses loses it, but I want to temper that because I'm not sure that the word Vayichar LeMoshe is losing it. Here, this is Everett Fox's translation. So the word is Vayichar LeMoshe Ma'od, and it says Moses became exceedingly upset. Okay. Vayomer el Adonai, al tefen al milchatam. He said to God, "Do not turn your face toward their grain gift. Lo chamor echad mehem nasati. I didn't have one donkey of theirs I carried off. Velo hareoti et achad mehem. I've not done ill to one of them." Okay, so here I'm I'm putting a kind of parallel track or a collateral with anger. Vayichar tends to mean in the Bible anger, and here Vayichar is being translated as upset. Now there is a slight difference, and I would pull up the concordance, from the website that I deal with, but you've heard the expression "Vayichar apo," "Vayichar la'apo," and we even say it in the Shema, "V'chara af Adonai bachem." God will be angry. Chara af is your nostrils flare, or it's that rage is expressed in Vayichar af. Okay, but here that is not exactly the phrase. It says Vayichar leMoshe, and there's a difference there, a difference that is associated with anger, but it's a different emotion. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I can't comment on the Hebrew, but it may also be that Moses is upset with himself, upset with the possibility, how can the people around me see things so differently, have such a different perspective, everything that I've done. So whether he's upset about that or political machinations or what, he's upset, the other people are upset. And there was one set of very interesting interpretations that I heard about, not so much Korah, but the others, that they thought that Moses deceived them and actually set them up for failure going up to the land of Israel. And there's a whole set of grumbling about whether that's also what they were upset about.
So it's not going to surprise us that these strong emotions uh, have everything associated with them. I almost want to say, and since I'm thinking about it, I'll say it now, and then I'll ask Marlene for a question, which is, I'm gonna make the parallel to grief and the extreme emotion of grief, especially in moments of crisis and loss, where it's uncontrollable, and grief in the moment of grief is like the floodgates of grief, and it is not only about the object of grief that is the thing that opens the floodgates. It's almost everything that comes out. In a moment of extreme emotion, such as grief or such as anger, it's everything. It's not only the thing, it's everything. I mean, you know, rarely in the you know in the arguments between spouses is it about the thing that is presenting, right? It's, why, and the rabbis were attentive to this also, you burnt my soup, and so it's if a husband typically gets angry at his wife, typically for, a miscooked meal, you have to wonder, Rabbi Malamet, if it's only about the meal, right? Because you know the you know if it's a completely irrational reaction to something that could be handled, just by engineering, like temperature or cooking skill, then you ask, what's really going on here? What are you really angry about? I mean, that you don't need to be a therapist or having been in therapy to really understand that when someone really kind of, has all of their rage provoked, it's usually not the issue, that the triggering issue. There's so much beneath it that it all comes flooding out at the same time. Marlene, go ahead.
Moshe is in a tough position anyway, because prior, when the Jews complained and he went to God, God laid it back on Moses' shoulders. So now when he's being blamed, he doesn't have any upper hand to really go to in good conscience, because he knows that it was given back to him.
Right. And I think it's such a great observation, which is also part of, like, I would say, this ought to be a good question as people like us who live with the Torah, read it from week to week, through the parshas of the year. We do, hold on to different themes, and that question is part of the theme of, what kind of character is this person? And do we blame him for this? And does he grow throughout the experience? And to what extent does God, quote unquote, grow through the experience of Israel in the desert, and all of this? And for the book to make sense as a book, and literature, never mind, as the guiding and the corner foundation of us, it has to have some kind of driving development here. And I would suggest that one of the drivers in the Torah is who is this man Moses anyway? What is this life? And you know I'm the question that is bothering me, which is related to your question, is we always present Moses as a man who needs anger management. And is that true? Or is that itself a caricature of Moses? Marlene, go ahead, follow up.
Korah didn't go to God to ask for him to be the leadership to be transferred to Korah. He went to Moses to have it transferred.
Right, because and here we want to kind of give Korach a bit of a check mark, because he is presenting to Moses a quote unquote legitimate uh, challenge, which is, God has chosen you, and that's not fair, because we are all deserving of being chosen. In a sense, that's what he's saying. He's saying, what makes you holy? I'm holy too. I should be chosen as well. Now as I said, it's a very sly kind of challenge because on the one hand, it's true, we're all chosen, we're all equal before God, and on the other hand, it's very self-serving to say that. So we always think of Korah in this kind of very sly, manipulative way. Go ahead, Skip.
I not for discussion,
Okay,
but just throw this out,
just statement.
a statement. Having worked in New York City in the audit program for brokerage, the brokerage industry, okay, which is probably very difficult. It comes down to true anger and facade anger, meaning the facade is out there to get done what you need to get done. Now, I'm not saying that we look at Moshe that way, but maybe we should start thinking about those things.
I think it's a lovely comment because it makes me want to ask, to what extent does Moses display anger as a technique or as a tool
Right.
in order to elicit responses from the people or to drive the action further. And
But
with your permission, just I want to go right to this because this is where I want to go with this, which is that we have the emotional outbursts. This is what I want to show here is that what I want to try and put this moment, the Korach moment, in the context of the emotional character development of Moses and ask, well, is this man an angry man, or does this man use anger, similar to what Skip said, is it a tool here in order? So no, go back to the beginning. I have Moses and the Egyptian. So recall the story when Moses has grown up. It says he went out to his brother, he saw his burdens, and he saw an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew man. He turned this way and that way and saw that there was no man there. He struck down the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. He went out again to the next day, and there two Hebrew men scuffling. He said to the guilty one, "Why do you strike your fellow?" He said, "Who made you prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Moshe became afraid and said, "Surely the matter is known." And I put that here because in our mind we have the scene of Moses smiting the Egyptian as a scene where here is a young man, Moses is a young man who has an an is he doing this out of anger, rage, vindictiveness, or righteous indignation, or out of defense? And all those are the literary questions. And to the defense of Moses and anger, nowhere in that scene does it say that Moses became exceedingly angry. So I am projecting onto that at the moment that he smote the Egyptian out of anger. But not. I'm saying he smote out of anger. It's almost like saying, the hockey season just ended. We cannot avoid, hockey imagery, but the game is an emotional game, and so when the players rough it up in the corners and it goes too far, they get angry, and anger, a fight breaks out, and then that's become part of the game, fighting. But fighting is the outlet of anger. Fighting is what happens when everything else no longer, playing doesn't work anymore. So our interpretive question with Moses at that point is it a fight, or is it an act of defense, or is it an act of righteous, manslaughter in which he's trying to save that person and kills him inadvertently? I want to go on because we have so many different examples here. So when Israel complains to Moses at the Sea of Reeds, at the Red Sea, They say to him, "Is this not the very word that we spoke to in Egypt, saying, 'Let us alone that we may serve Egypt'? Indeed, better for us serving Egypt than our dying in the wilderness." Moshe said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand fast and see God's deliverance, which he will work for you this day. For as you see Egypt today, you will never see it again for the ages. God will do battle for you and be still." Again, that's a case where Moses is not, it doesn't say he's angry. It doesn't say he's angry, but he reacts strongly and as a leader, saying, you're complaining, this is what's happening. And at the moment, which nearly was a crisis because the people were at the shore, the Egyptians were chasing after them. He's like, what are we going to do now? And the emotional tension is rising. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one, which is at the bitter waters after the sea. He cried out to God, and God directed him to some wood. This is after the people complained that they have no water, and he throws the wood into the water. The water became sweet, and there he imposed law and judgment for them. There he tested them. But they did not, and then following that, they did not hearken to Moses, and several men left some of it until daybreak. That's manna. Moses says to everybody, you recall, take one, omer a day, and on Shabbat don't do it. And then, of course, they did, and Moses became furious with them. And that's interesting. It's vayktsof there. That's not chara. Vayktsof is a different word. Moses does become angry. And what's so amazing about this is that, you have tremendous sympathy for Moses. The people are impossible. Whenever you say something to them, they don't do it. Moses said to them, you got to keep Shabbat. You got to not do this on Shabbat. And then they did. They collected the manna. And he got so angry at them. So, in a way, his anger is justified, because why wouldn't you get angry? They're just not listening to you. They're behaving, so atrociously. And then we have, the classic moments. Masa Mariva, again, the water. Moses said, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test God? And of course, the tablets. So in chapter 32, when the golden calf is being worshipped, Moses sees it. It was when he neared the camp and saw the calf and the dancing that Moses' anger flared up.
What's the Hebrew word for anger in that one?
Vayechar apo. Sorry, I do have it queued up in a Hebrew text, and so therefore we will do that. Just a second. Okay, it is Exodus 32. Here we go. Boom. Okay. Thank you for doing that. And there we go, Google Chrome. So, and it was when he neared the camp. I'll make it big, as long. And he saw the dancing. You could all see that, right? And then Moses, he's in a rage. And he threw the tablets from his hands and smashed them beneath the mountain. So this is back what Skip is talking about, which is that this is where, you, on the one hand, well, it's natural. This is natural for him, because he sees that everything is being violated in front of him. On the other hand, he is not out of control here. He knows what he's doing here. If you read the story carefully, he is. It's not that he's worked it out, all ahead of time, but he knows that there's a deliberate method here that the people are terrified of him, that he expresses his anger in a ferocious way. They need to recoil at that anger in order to reset their relationship with God and their relationship with him. So in many ways, the anger is instinctive, it's natural, but it's also very deliberate. Okay. My point from a literary perspective here, or from the perspective of just tracing all of the mentions of anger, is here it's Vayichar Af Moshe, okay, and it's Moses, and that's clearly anger, okay, but when we get back to the our text here. So he smashed it. And we have Moses getting angry at the Nadav and Avihu issue, right? When and I don't want to skip it, but it is an important moment. Moses wants the procedure to be done perfectly, and it got violated by their act and the desecration of the presence of their bodies. And Moses gets very, very upset about that. And it says he became furious. And there, again, the technical term in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 16 is that vaiktsof. Vaiktsof is again, the expression of anger. I'm going to stop the sharing and go to Ilana. Go ahead.
I have two comments.
Go
I
ahead.
hope, I hope the first one I'm not repeating. Maybe Moshe is angry that Korah is doubting the decision of God by choosing him and not Korah. Like God doesn't know who to choose. So that's one. The other one, there is a word in Arabic, and it's actually a curse that is very similar to the word haron. We say in a bad mouth, and I apologize, but
Yeah.
what it is, that אני מרגיש חרא.
Chara.
I feel
Yes. So that has become part of the Hebrew, colloquial language, and it's awfulness, a whole, I mean, a whole set of associations of awfulness, okay, which is, probably related, okay. Let's go to we have so that the Moses' anger with the Nadav and Avihu issue. Um, and then one more when the people are weeping from Tavera when they have no food. And then I'm sorry, that's the last one leading up to our text here. So the question then is Moses angry here, or is there something else going on? And for this, I'm going to take my license, being in the rabbinic tradition, to turn to the rabbis. And the rabbis, as we all know, are very in tuned with the the text. And here is a little excerpt from a midrash from Bamidbar Rabbah, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen right now, and it is follows. So the rabbis are talking about this whole episode, and then they comment on Vayichar leMoshe. So I have it in my little Parsha sheets. I don't make this point every week when I, explain the Parsha sheet, but when I shade something in orange, it's a rabbi text. A shading in blue is a biblical text, and a shading in green is a parshanut, in medieval usually or modern interpretation, parshanut commentary, and purple is kind of everything else or poetry or whatever, or things that I make up myself.
Hmm.
So this is orange. This is rabbinic material from Bamidbar Rabbah. He says as follows: Moses variant says, "Lama, why?" So notice he's translating Vayichar as incensed here, and then it says as follows. I'm just going to try and get the spelling, the red out of here. Shadam hadam im chavero umitvakech umishivo. It is because a person who deliberates with another and argues, and he responds to him, yesh lo nachat ruach, he has satisfaction. V'imeno mishivo, but if he does not respond to him, yesh lo tsar, he is aggrieved. Moses said to the Lord, do not turn to their offering. Al tikablem b'tshuva. Do not accept them in repentance. It's going to be a little, it's going to get a little specific here. Do not turn to their service. What is to their offering? Thus Moses said before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe, I know that these have a portion in that meal offering that they sacrificed, as is stated, da-da-da. Since these withdrew from your children, do not look to their portion. Let the fire leave it and fail to consume it. I'll try and explain this in a second. Here as follows. The real core of this text is when a person debates or deliberates with another and argues and he responds to him, he has satisfaction. He's aggrieved. The meaning here is when you are in a debate with someone and there's no resolution to that debate, or an argument or a deliberation, or the person you're arguing with just shuts down and doesn't even answer back. There's a sense of frustration. It may be just classic passive aggression, which is that your combatant, your debating partner, is being aggressive in a passive way by not responding to you. And by not responding to you, they get under your skin. But not only does that make you angry, but it aggrieves you. That it is to say you become, I don't want to say saddened, but you're hurt by that. You are hurt by the actions or inactions of the person that you are talking to because they're no longer talking to you. And hurt is in the web of emotions that is linked to anger. So what I'm saying here is that this, it's tempting to identify Moses' reaction here to Korah and to Datan and Aviram specifically as a reaction of anger. But I also want to see that it's a reaction of hurt, and it's not just simply being offended, but it's being offended in the deepest way possible. And when you go back to what they say, they're relating to the whole project and the land. The project of redemption, being redeemed from Egypt, is Moses' central project. And the project of bringing them into the land is Moses' central objection. And so what Datan and Aviram are saying to them, you didn't bring us out, we had it better there, and look where we are now, and we're not even getting to a land of milk and honey. The land that we came from is the land of milk and honey. So what they are doing is they are cutting the jugular vein. They're offending him to the extent that they're saying your life's project has been a failure. You did not redeem us because we're no better off here in the desert, and you did not take us into the land because we're still in the desert. So you are a failure and a phony, and and they don't even have to say much more than that. They just say it in the language that they said. So Moses, how do you respond when someone says you're a failure? You're hurt by it. It's a personal affront. And it's not vaychar apo, he's not angry, he's just aggrieved, and by aggrieved, he's hurt. Go ahead, Stan. You have to unmute. Unmute yourself, unmute. Press your space bar. Stanley.
I was just saying that's fascinating, and I very much agree with you. With hurt and anger, they're reciprocal, and very often one is covering the other. But with Moses, he doesn't seem to respond to. Yes, it's true. I mean, he could have been more empathic. I've been leading you around now for so many years, and we're not there yet. But we'll get there and relax or something to mollify them. Instead, he reacts defensively. He says, did I steal one of your donkeys or something? I mean, it's a funny example. It seems almost trivial, but he's hurt. That's a good example of where he is hurt, that
Sure,
he feels like often many politicians who are turned out of office
sure.
will feel I did all this work and so on, and then they kick me out. So that I think it's important to recognize that this is a man who is, as you say, he has this project and they're challenging it and saying he's not up to it. They haven't fulfilled it. And he's not only sort of angry at them, but he's hurt by their
Hurt.
lack of appreciation, let's say.
And he I I think in sympathy, one second, Annette, he has a right to be hurt. I think, I mean, I'm not going to deny him his feelings. That's why I feel, at this moment, I usually want to say, I'm going to kind of defend myself. Usually, I'm very critical about Moses, but here I'm very sympathetic to him. He has a right to feel hurt. Go ahead, Annette, unmute yourself. Unmute, press your space bar.
I just want to verify. So you're saying, you, the rabbi, you're saying that the crux of the story is not actually the hole they fall into, but actually Moses' emotional anger
I'm
that
not saying that
moves
that's
the
the
story. Is that
I'm
true?
focusing I'm focusing that's my theme today. I mean, we can emphasize different themes in different kinds of presentations here. The story has a whole arc to it. I think this is a central element in the story, which is, to focus on his emotion. I think is a very satisfying question throughout the Torah. As I've tried to show here, there is a kind of, we can graph, or pinpoint different places in the story where Moses has emotional outbursts that lead us to I would say, a caricature of Moses as the angry man. I've said it myself in sermons, whatever, that Moses needs an anger management class. It's kind of facile to say that Moses is someone who is a deeply human being. It's a, I was inspired for this class by this book here. This is Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg, Moses: A Human Life. She's a wonderful writer, and it was one sentence that got me here for this, and she says here, Moses' angry reaction becomes in the Midrash a deep grief. This is presented as a normal human reaction to being ignored by another. And I was really stunned by that sentence because I'd never really seen this reaction as grief before. And I was really interested in the Midrash, and she's playing a little bit because it's not a lot of Midrash. It's the same Midrash, one line of Midrash that gets repeated in a few locations. But what she's saying is that he's hurt. He's hurt. So when a person is hurt, my reaction as a reader is I have empathy. I have empathy for him. So then I want to ask, well, why is he hurt? Well, he's hurt because here's the Tana Aviram saying to him, you're basically a failure, right? And that's hurtful, all right? And so the Midrash, as usual, the rabbis are reading with tremendous emotional insight and sensitivity to him. And as I say, this is it's not only plausible, I think I don't want to say it's the truth, but it's what's going on here. There's an element of hurt here. Alana, and then Bob, and then we'll come to some conclusion. Go ahead.
Uh, Moshe should remind himself that he didn't even want the mission to begin with. He agreed after being convinced and all this. So he did it out of, not sure out of what, listened to God and followed the request. Also, there is no list about his failings. What exactly did he do wrong? Number one, number two, where is it? He didn't do a good job and goodbye. So why is he taking it so seriously?
He's Moses. This is an exceptional human being. We have to at least give him credit for being Moses. He's a person who he has extraordinary capabilities. I think he is a learning person as well. I think that part of the theme that we explore with Moses is that here's a person who does develop compassion through the course of his life, and therefore, to be at the receiving end of such a barb, such a caustic accusation, you cannot hardly help but feel for him. I think that again, I feel, and we all have a right to be very critical of Moses everywhere in the Torah. I mean, you know, uh, we like to say he's the prophet, he's the perfect, but it's nonsense. He does fail plenty of times in leadership and in diplomacy and in things said, things not said. I mean, we could think of lots of different cases where, a different kind of person would react differently. However, he's Moses, and therefore he doesn't get a license to do this. He's learning. But what I would say here is that he's right to feel offended here because he should feel offended. They're saying nasty, terrible things to him. Bob.
Can I,
But,
just one more?
yeah.
Look at the leaders today, how they are how they are being criticized. Look at Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, how can we take it?
So, I think, of course, we never want to get into
No,
specifics.
I don't want to get into politics.
No, I'll just say, I think politicians over the course of, and this is, a decades spanning career, they develop, I don't want to say immunity, but a thick skin. They develop a thick skin to be able to deal, and they understand that this is part of the game here, that everyone, and therefore they don't take it seriously, or they don't let themselves be swayed by it. I just, before Bob, comment, I'm have in my mind an anecdote from a Rabbi Schulweis in California, who told a story at one of our rabbinical conventions about, a tragic situation where there was an accident and a car accident, and someone died, and the family, was so understandably enraged and upset, and of course inconsolable, and began to really throw and hurl accusations at him, and say things like there is no God, where is the God, etc. And in a sense, he became a kind of representation of God to them, and they hurled all their anger at him. And he said in the presentation, he said, "Look, I stood there, I took it, I understood what the moment was, I understood, that this was inconsolable anger, and it was being directed against me as a symbol of all that they were. But I could not help but feel also personally offended, because I had spent a career in this community and a career, decades with this family. And, I get up every week and they know what I feel. And they know how I talk about all of these things. And they rejected all of that. And they rejected my teaching of them in terms of this. And I could not also not help but feel offended personally by I was, and so, to me, it illustrated the line, or the lack of a line, between when is it personal and when is it professional. And I'll say it here. I almost want to say to Moses, Moses has a professional duty to be the leader here. And, you know, if we were put to give him an MBA from Harvard Management School, he would be able to separate the personal from the professional. On the other hand, how could he not be offended here? How could what they say not be offensive? You've undermined the raison d'etre of my life, and you're telling me horrible things about myself, really, that I'm interpreting. And you know what? I'm hurt. I'm hurt by it. Bob, go ahead. Unmute.
Two comments. The first is, as I listen to this, I want to know what's the take-home message for me, for all of us. And there's a Moses in each of us. There's a Korah in each of us, right? There's all of these other people in each of us. And one of the take-homes for me is what kinds of
There's God in each of us too.
That's true. What types of machlokeses are appropriate and inappropriate? Clearly, Shammai and Hillel, and so many debates go on. So how do you deal with humility and anger and listen to each other, which is one of the take-homes, I think, that come from this and others. The other, at the risk of bringing up some mysticism, especially since this is the last class you mentioned, is would you like to comment on those people that say that Moses has the Gilgal or the reincarnation of Hevel and Korah is Cain? And there's so many elements of what were the emotions that they may or may not have been feeling at that point in time, where Cain was jealous of Hashem not accepting, the offerings and stuff. And so there's a lot of apparent discussion about Korah and Hevel, and that this is a rectification and the swallowing of the blood and the swallowing of the people. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
So let me do the take home first. And of course, the take home is I liked what you said, and it's very Jungian. I guess we are in every character in this in the Torah, and we should see the Torah in some ways in the dreamscape, that just as a dream, you are every character in the dream. We are, in a sense, identifying with every the character. There's a little Korah in each of us. There's a little Moshe in each of us. I think the rabbis, have their crystallized version of the story in the Pirkei Avot, which you may have alluded to, which is machloket, the notion of what constitutes machloket, the Shem Shemayim, eno sofa mitkayem, that the debates for the sake of heaven have ultimate conclusions that yield things that will enable you to derive meaning from them constantly, and where there are debates that are simply driven by ego, they're not. They're limited in scope and often deleterious to our well-being. Um, there is a take-home here in terms of what constitutes. I mean, the message I was going for is what is anger and what is being aggrieved, and and I think if I can splice anger away from being aggrieved, I develop a sensitivity to this moment in which Moses is living, which is that he's entitled to be offended, and that we all understand our complicated emotional lives, in which at sometimes we are offended by things to the point of anger, and sometimes we simply are angry. And Moses, in I love the title here, A Human Life. Moses is a human being who has the fullness of all these emotions. I believe that the arc of Moses' story is a story of development, that through the course of his life, he's not the angry man. In fact, he's a man who loves life, and who loves, and is very for lack of a better word, passionate, and clinging to life and clinging to people. He may not necessarily be the perfect leader, but he's the best that we have. And that is something. He is extraordinary in the sense that he does the most important thing that a Jewish leader had to do at that time, which is lead the people and bring them. We all know that he doesn't get into the land also, and I didn't even talk about the moment where he becomes exceptionally angry, which is next week's parsha, which unfortunately I won't be able to teach, which is that he hits the rock, and it's hard for me not to interpret that moment as a moment of anger. Maybe I'll talk about it in the Parsha talk, and I'll invite you all to listen next week when my two colleagues and I talk about that moment. Moses hits the rock, and it's hard not to see frustration and anger in that moment. So that's the takeaway. In terms of the linkage between Moshe and Korah, Cain, and Hevel, as usual, I enjoy the association again on the basis of this is one artful way of reading the Torah, and it yields fine fruit for those who engage in it, which is that we're always comparing one character to another. The mystics were doing it, not only because it posed a kind of intellectual, spiritual problem, but I think it functions as a literary, problem or puzzle for them, based on the vision that the Bible is one organic whole, and that all the pieces fit together in myriads of ways that are, and infinite ways that are for us to disclose. So if I can make a connection between Cain and Korach and Hevel and Moshe, great. I mean, I'm doing it in my own way in all the time when I'm trying to link up, the phrases in the Bible. I'll give you an example. The Vayichar Af, he got angry. Well, that figure of speech occurs often in the book of Breshit. Jacob gets angry, Joseph, they all get angry, and they're all entitled to be angry. And at some point, you see emotions. Talk about anger. Esav is so angry he wants to kill Jacob, and uh, you know and go to the book of Esther, Chamato Ba'arabo, the in Haman, who is an anti-hero, a villain, has this rage and anger that is so irrational and focused against the Jewish people, right? And becomes for that reason the arch symbol of the anti-Semite, because the irrational needs an outlet. It has its outlet in the Mordechai figure, and then Mordechai is representative of the entire Jewish people. And for that reason, Haman is an annihilationist. And that's really, anti-Semitism in a nutshell. I mean, the book of Esther is really a manual of that. So here we are. Here we're talking about, and we just shoveled the whole Bible into the story, and that's the way you read the Bible. That's how you do it. I mean, that's the joy of it. And then maybe we'll end with this, because ultimately why do we study, and why we all come here from week to week? We come first because we want to learn things. We want to enjoy we want to kind of satisfy curiosities about this part of our lives. We want to deepen our own self-understanding, and ultimately it's joy. I really believe it. We get a lot of pleasure out of this, a lot of joy out of it, and we are remade by this process. And so it's been a pleasure to do that with you over the course of the year. We're going to take a little break. I'm going to miss it for sure, but
Come back.
we will come back, and we will start with things in Devarim. Probably no, we'll probably be back in Breshit. All right. So with that, everyone, we'll see you all. Have a wonderful summer, and stay tuned to Parsha Talk. We'll have a lot of this on Parsha Talk too.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank